Yeah, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Evan Hoffman, who really doesn't need much of an introduction to this group anyway. Evan came to me probably about a year ago, and showed me a spreadsheet that he'd been maintaining and allowing other people to use, and keeping up to date, and also an idea for a better way to do the whole thing, and then with essentially zero help from me, made his idea into a reality, and now he's going to show it to you. And if you're in the market for an internship, then you certainly might want to consider actually using it. Evan, I think the floor is yours.
Thanks for the introduction, and thanks to everyone who came. This means a lot. This is a project I've worked on, obviously, for the last 2 semesters, but it's something I've been passionate about for quite a bit longer. So well, let's go ahead and get into this. All right, so Clark Tech Apply. Effectively, what I built here is a web application that aggregates internship listings from a variety of places, whether it's LinkedIn, Glassdoor, or a ton of other sources, even Handshake, right, where tech internships are posted. Acknowledging that there's not always an overlap. So some places have some internship listings that others don't have. So my goal is to get them all into one place to make it easy to apply for Clark students. We track internship listings in what we define as tech, right? A tech internship counts as a software engineering internship, data science, cybersecurity, product or program management, IT / information architecture, and technology consulting. Also the application allows you to track an internship and effectively keep track of where you are in the interview process, whether you are at a phone interview stage, whether you have final interviews, accepted an offer, rejected an offer, etc. And the final thing is this application is going to let Clarkies trying to break into this really selective and competitive market a competitive advantage, which I'll go into a bit later. So the problem effectively that I guess I identified a while back is that at Clark, right, within our department, we have a lack of, some students are not aware, right, that there are tens of thousands of high-paid summer internship programs for tech undergrads in the industry. And this is, we have a lot of students now who know about this, right, but there are still some students who aren't aware that this is an option for them. There's also a lack of exposure by faculty, and I think we have amazing faculty here at Clark, and I don't have a doubt that if one of their advisees or one of their students, even in the class, came up to them and said, "Hey, I want to apply for internships," I don't have a doubt that the faculty would, be their greatest cheerleader, that they give them all the support they need. If you needed interview help, I'm sure the faculty would help you with resources. Of course, Professor Basie provides a great workshop on, the coding interview. And I know Professor McGee also once in a while, sends around a listing that maybe one of his colleagues in academia has for, a summer internship. So there are some things that faculty do, and I know that they'd be passionate about getting behind students who show an interest. But I went 2 years without really knowing that this was a thing. So maybe the faculty, I'm trying to give the faculty a tool so that they can empower students a little better in this regard. Also, there's a lack of specific knowledge on the part of our career services here at Clark. The tech interview process is so different, the timeline's so different, our resumes should look different than the kind of templated approach that the career services use. So I've had a lot of trouble with them supporting us. They often get things very wrong that can be detrimental. And part of, so yeah, they're not really there for tech students at Clark, unfortunately. And of course, no student should be made to have a summer internship, right? A lot of students will prefer to do summer research, and a lot of students will prefer to have the summer off, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Everyone needs a break. But the consequences of simply not making people aware of this are these. So, seniors the last few years have graduated, some of them without jobs in a field where there is a high need for it, right? There are openings, right? But they haven't really been able to get that exposure and get matched to a job upon graduation. On another hand, companies in the industry are not aware of the unique value that Clarkies bring. I found that, even in interviewing, having this liberal arts education has really, really given me like a huge leg up in some cases. And Clarkies bring a very unique value, I think, to industry. And without, a large number of us participating in that, it is hard for companies to understand this. Also, unfortunately, some international students who want to work and stay in the US, if they can't find work upon graduation, they can lose their visas. It's a very real risk, which I know some students are dealing with right now. And, if there'd been exposure to the option to do internships earlier on, they might have a full-time offer lined up. And so I think it's important that we make people aware of this so that they can make the choices for themselves. Also, our department's case for more resources from Clark University is not necessarily as strong as it could be, right? If we are showing, great numbers for employment, great numbers for internships, we definitely have a very strong, case to be made to the university to get more resources. And this is a resource I pulled from our marketing materials here in the CS department, which it shows, great, really good job placements that Clark students have had in computer science over the last few years. But this does go back, I believe, over 4 years. And I kind of have this, vision, like if students want to have internships or aren't aware, we could make one of these every year, right? And it could look like this every year. So that's a goal that I think is definitely reachable. So having, thought about this a few years back, for the last 2 years, I've kind of made a spreadsheet, right, which Professor Basie talked about, where I do go to all those sources I talked about early, and I aggregate listings and I put them on this spreadsheet for internship openings starting a year before, because this application process, some companies in tech open it up the spring before the summer, which is in itself a year before the summer that the actual internship takes place. So right now in May, for example, we are seeing openings for internships for summer 2022 in the tech industry. It's very early, second only to finance, which starts recruiting even earlier. So I made this spreadsheet and I allowed, students, I spread through word of mouth through some group chats. We had about 6 students really use it actively last year for internships this coming summer. And so every student would make a column, right? They put their name there and they track where they are in each application process. And effectively, what this really allowed us to do was I as the administrator, right, I was finding these openings and putting them on the spreadsheet. And effectively, I have like a daily regimen of places I check, right, which isn't just the, the big LinkedIn sites. It's also individual career sites for the Fortune 500. And while I don't have to check, 500 career sites a day, because they do sometimes get posted to those well before they're anywhere else, right? So while I don't check those, and that gives you a competitive advantage, of course, because if you apply early when there's 5 applicants, it beats when these are like discovered and there's 1,000 applicants. Instead of checking all 500 career sites a day, I only needed to know through years of data that I've collected when they're going to release those internships. Like some post it in May, some post it in July. And so knowing that means I only really have to check 10 to 15 places a day. So it's not as hard as checking 500 websites. So what we learned from doing this spreadsheet for 2 years is it's a very competitive market, right? Finding and applying to internships. On LinkedIn, you're going to see a lot of graphics like the one on the left, right, where people kind of like me who collect this data, send around 100 to 200 applications per season. That's pretty common. And you have these really stark metrics, right? Out of 101, applications this person sent, they only got 14 interviews, right? So it is quite a competitive landscape. And it's also a landscape where quantity matters, right? It's not a typical quality over quantity situation in that um, you should, my philosophy, and the people who know a lot about this, and I'll talk about another group later, they know that you should apply to everything, but also put quality into an application. And quality in an application means maybe you find a referral for that company, right? Maybe you try to connect on LinkedIn with an alum there to, have them give you a referral. You can do extra things for each application, but those extra steps are time consuming, and you don't want to sacrifice quantity for that. It is really a numbers game. But do that as much as you can, right? But only within the time you have. So we did something right with this spreadsheet model. In summer 2021, so upcoming, we had students get offers at TIAA, Markel, National Grid, Oracle, Intel, and Google, right? And those were just students who used the spreadsheet and didn't have any referrals or any other kind of connections to these companies. They just applied as soon as they opened, right? And all 6 students who applied to at least 45 listings, right? And we're domestic students. It is more challenging for international students. All students who used the sheet and marked at least, that they applied to 45 listings, all got an internship for this coming summer during a pandemic when at least half internships were completely slashed, right? So that's very impressive. There's also a cascade effect, right? So I interned at Capital One last summer. I was able to then refer another student who was then, given the referral, was able to go through the interview process. They still had to qualify, they still had to pass certain bars. But getting that referral for me meant that they kind of got out of the stack of a million resumes, right? So there is a cascade effect, right? When we have some students with internships, they can then help other students through the process at the company that they interned at. So if we reach kind of a critical mass, right, it can be much easier for Clark students, and we can alleviate some of the challenges that we face compared to other schools. So I'm going to quickly give a demonstration of the application that I built, clarktechApply.com, and then I'll come back to this presentation to discuss the tech stack and a few technical things about it. So this is the website homepage over here, and I'm going to just go over the main features really quick. So this is the on the internships page. If we click general, right, this is the general internship listings. So we have this table, right? It has these listings that are currently open. It has the tags, right? So the kind of work it is, software engineering. If you're only interested in software engineering jobs, right, you can just type in suite and you'll only see those, right? You also can sort by stuff by whether they allow only, it says class of 23, right? That's because those are going to be juniors right now. In the summer 22, they will be between junior and senior year. Right now, they're actually sophomores. So most companies only allow those juniors, right? So, if you're not a junior and you're currently a first year, right, looking to get an internship between your sophomore and junior year, you would care about these ones that say any can apply, right? So we make that distinction. We also have international students, whether these companies will sponsor visas, because it can be a huge pain applying to something and they tell you they don't sponsor visas. So as an international student, you can't do that internship. Like I said, it's a very hard landscape out there. We currently only have one, it's very early in the process, that actually allows international students and says they will sponsor visas. A lot of them don't mention it at all, right? And that's TBD over here. And if an international student were to apply to one of these and go through this process, and then they were told no, right, or yes, like we will, they can go ahead and on the right, you see this flag errors feature, right? And they can submit a correction. So no, international students can't apply. And the reasoning was, I applied and was told, right? And then they can submit that. And I'll show you what happens to that submitted correction later. But we are kind of crowdsourcing that functionality. Also, you can do that to indicate the link is down and it's closed. So I'm going to refresh this again. And the next really big feature here, and the one that I'm going to talk about next, is tracking, right? So if you click apply, it just brings you to the application website, right? It doesn't do anything for you, but then you can go ahead and click track, right? And as you see, it grays out because you're already tracking it. And if you're applying to a few positions, you can go ahead and track them. And then you go ahead over to My Apps, right? And now we have what you've tracked over here. you're able to indicate that you applied. We stored this information for you. You're able to say, hey, I'm at the recorded behavioral interview stage. I'm at a final on-site interview. And you know, if you applied 100 internships, like a lot of people do, this is going to fill up pretty quick, and this is going to be a very helpful organizational tool, right? You also can go ahead and untrack and such. So the last thing I'm going to do on the side of a user is I'm going to, well, first of all, we have also two other internship kind of categories. We have one for traditionally underrepresented groups in tech. So certain companies have programs like Google STEP or Microsoft Explore, Price Waterhouse Cooper Start. Those are only for, they're tech internships, right? It's not like a program where you learn about diversity or anything, but they are for specifically students from underprivileged backgrounds, right? So we have the eligibility requirements. For example, Royal Bank of Canada in the US, this is their New York office, says to get into this program, you must identify as Black, African American, Hispanic, Latinx, and or Native American. So we list those eligibility requirements over here. And we also have a page for exploratory programs, which are, you know, 2 days to like 1 week long programs the summer before the actual internship. So these are actually for 2021. And these are very easy to get into. And you basically do workshops all week or whatever. They teach you about tech at their company, and they also will help you get ready and give you an interview guaranteed for the internship program the next summer. So these are easy to get into, very valuable, and you can also put them on your resume. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to code a lot. So these are great experiences. So we have one over here. So like I said, over on internships, you also can suggest something that the administrator might have missed, right? Like, I hope we don't miss anything. I think the administrator has I built a pretty comprehensive list of research resources, but you know, you can go ahead and just suggest something that we may have missed, right? And you can put in the tags, et cetera, et cetera. You can go ahead and submit it. So this user right here is a general user, right? But we also have the administrator, right? Or the privileged user. So that's going to look like this account over here. And you see we have this approvals tab up here, right? This is unique to the a privileged user. So you can go ahead and see that, you know, someone submitted that internship recommendation, we can approve it, which also means, you know, reviewing it, putting any tags that the person missed. And if I clicked approve, it would be added to the internship table, which I don't want to do because that's live. So I'm going to go ahead and reject that. And then if you remember the edit we made for the international student who went through the process and it turned out could not actually get sponsorship from that, we can go ahead to edits. And as you can see, this edit has been submitted for that job. The only fields that are filled in are the relevant ones. So the new fields, no, international students can't apply. The administrator would go ahead and fix that value, right? And I can dismiss that edit. So that's the application itself. I'm going to go back to the presentation now so everyone can see kind of how I built this. The first thing I want to talk about is my overall development process. I wanted to take this project as an opportunity to really go through, I guess, the principles that, you know, a lot of us learned in Professor McGee's software engineering course for good program design practices, good software design practices, because I am going to be a software engineer starting August in a real enterprise company. And so these are stuff I'm going to be putting into practice every day. So I kind of wanted to do it right? Like textbook right for building software. So I used an agile development process, which of course utilizes different sprints. Each sprint has a planning, designing, building, testing, reviewing, and launching phase, right? And I basically broke this up per feature. So every feature that I coded into the site, I had a sprint for, right? And went through all these steps. So this is kind of the timeline of me building this thing. So starting in August 2020, which is the first semester start of the honors project, which is a 2-semester commitment, I came up with the conception for the idea, and also I made a requirements analysis, right? Which is a crucial first step in building software. In September 2020, I spun up a local Node.js server. I set up a local database, and I built the infrastructure for user registration, you know, keeping track of users, logging in, logging out, and browser persistence using cookies. In October, I actually built that internship page, right? And I created Be My Apps, right? An individual ability to track internship listings. And finally, in November and December, I implemented that stage tracking so you can record where you are privately. And at that point, the application clarktechfly.com, right, did everything that the spreadsheet could, right, which was my initial goal. So I was very happy to have implemented that. I also made the table, right, the internship table paginated and sortable, right, which is a very good thing, quality of life for people who only some, internships might apply to them, so they only want to see those. In January, I made a major UI improvements overhaul. I created a tip page and the untrack functionality. Tips is a page I didn't show in the demonstration, but it has a ton of like stuff on how this process works, right? And I actually worked with Ty to create a very comprehensive guide, which is linked there, because it's a lot of stuff that career services can't help us with. And finally, in February, I did the cloud migration, right? Which is my attempt to get real students to start to test this thing. So I moved the entire application from a local environment to a cloud environment. So now it's on the internet and people can use it. And I began limited testing with a few very kind students who gave me their time and got feedback from them. In March, I implemented email confirmations, right? So when you register an account, we confirm your email. And I built this from scratch, right? So I didn't use like Auth0 or anything. So this was also like a very learning experience for me. I also allowed email recovery, which is a process I'll go into a bit later. It's kind of complex, but if you forget your password, right, how do you recover your account? I implemented default sort, so the tables load in with the newest internship at the top, so people can, bookmark it, check every day for new listings, and get on top of that and get that competitive advantage. Also, a pet peeve. I decided to make the Node application force people to connect on HTTPS, right? Because I hate that someone might go to the site and it says their browser might say, "Hey, connection unsecure" or something like that, which is kind of a buzzkill. And we don't even store any like important information, but it's still, I make it so people can only use a secure connection, which is all done automatically for them. No user has to worry about that. In April, I created the infrastructure for app suggestions, right, in case we miss anything. I also created the privileged users and approval mechanism I showed last. I also built out settings, account settings, which has everything from changing your email to password to changing your name to deleting your account, right? I personally don't like accounts that I'm not using anymore, websites keeping that information. So, if you're graduating or something and want us to delete your information, you can delete your account. I also built out the underrepresented students program page, and I also created logging. So, logging so I can see how I can monitor errors and such. And in May this month, I built the flag and suggest corrections functionality. I put in the exploratory program page, and I allowed students to opt out of email notifications. And as of now, this program has 3,991 lines of code that I've written, which can mean a lot or a little depending who you are. It's just a fun metric. So now to talk about the tech stack I used. On the back end, I use Node.js, right, to run server-side code and also deploy the front end. I use Express for the middleware and also to connect to the database. Node Mailers is the fun package I use that allows me to send emails without, third-party service. And bcrypt, which allows me to hash passwords and such, because of course I never want to keep passwords in plain text in my database. That's bad form. On the front end, I, of course, used HTML, CSS, JavaScript facilitated through Bootstrap. But my HTML files actually are going to have, instead of the .html extension, they're going to have .hbs for handlebars, which is a templating engine built on top of HTML. So the code looks exactly like HTML. It's just, it allows me some advanced features that kind of work well in the Node.js environment. Data tables, that's what's facilitated those great tables I have, sortable and all that. It's built on Bootstrap, but it's a separate company that offers that library, and also the jQuery library to give me some additional front-end functionality, like more pop-ups and stuff like that. As for utility, we are deployed on the cloud using Heroku Cloud Services, which is owned by Salesforce. And of course, Git and GitHub for versioning and source control. On the database end, I use a MySQL database hosted by ClearDB. So this is kind of an eyesore, and I only have this in here as a UML, a hacky UML diagram that I made. And if anyone wants to stare at this longer, feel free to let me know. But effectively, this shows the main methods, right, and how from the user and the views, right, the pages that the users see, what they click, how it percolates through the system and affects the different tables in the database. And not all the methods are included here, but effectively what I want people to take away from this is this Node.js database kind of stack I used. You have the views, right, which are on the front end on the client side. But most of the computing is done on the server side, right, through the Node.js exports, which is kind of this middle layer here. And then the database layer is called from the actual server side code. I have a quick, a similar UML chart here for the database schema. All that really, don't think this is a hierarchy, right? It's more like a sandwich. So at the top, we keep track of users, their information, and each time a user registers, we create an individual table for them to keep those listings that they've tracked, right? That's the middle layer. And at the bottom, we have the internships table, right, which is where we store internships. We store all our internships there, whether it's the friend or represented groups or exploratory programs. We just have flags that denote that. Also, for suggestions, right, the kind of suggestions, we don't add a suggestion right in, right? It has to be verified by an administrator, so we keep those separately, and those feed into the internships table once they're approved. On the security side, effectively, I want to follow best secure software development practices, right? And a disclaimer, we don't keep anything, horrendous, right? Like we don't keep any data that is really going to matter to anyone except passwords, which people might create for this that might be passwords they use elsewhere, right? So this was more of a hobby for me to make sure that we're not susceptible to like DDoS attacks or stuff like that. And also because I'm going to be going into, a real enterprise company, and there's responsibility on me as a software developer to employ best practices, right, in my code. So the first thing we do is we, like I said, we don't store passwords in plain text. We use bcrypt to hash and salt. And we use 8 rounds of salting actually and hashing. There's a secure recovery process, right? So accounts can't be hijacked. If you forget your password, right, we send it through email, which we've already verified, which of course is the right thing to do when you forget a password, but also we have to kind of track a token we generate for you through all the buttons you click after that through the reset process on our website. So keeping that information kind of secret was very important. The most common kind of attack that an application like mine could be susceptible to is obviously an SQL injection attack, right? Where someone puts SQL code in a field that then gets sent to my database. So I employed some practices to kind of harden that and kind of cure that code, typecast that input that a user puts in so that it can't be interpreted as code when it gets to the database. And also connection management, right? So connections are less likely to be hijacked through like a middleman attack. The MySQL connections are established, used, and immediately closed. It doesn't give us full security, but we use something called connection pooling, which has the server delegate those connections to the database on a case-by-case basis. So scaling and costs of this platform, right? The pressure points that I encountered for scaling and costs have to do with storage, right, in the database, and also the amount of connections people can connect to this application at a time. That means just going to the website, loading up the internships table, and having that populate from the database. So for hosting, our slug size on Heroku, which is our build pack, so that's the sum of the data of all the code files along with all the dependency files we use. That at the tier that I pay for that service, we have 500 megabytes, but we only use 77, and that's never going to get to 500 no matter how many other features I add. So as for building out the application more, that's going to scale just fine in the future. There's also if a host can mute the people unmuted, appreciate that. So this hosting costs us $7 a month, right? And I have a academic credit for that that lasts for 2 years. So that's free for 2 years effectively. As for data size, right, database size, each new user adds about 0.016 megabytes of overhead and storage, or 16 kilobytes. At the tier we have, we cannot, the free tier, which is a plugin connected to the Roku, we can't exceed more than 5 megabytes of storage, which would be 312 users, which will never really be a problem because there's only around 70, I guess, CS majors on average at a time. Of those, I doubt there will be 70 holding accounts, and we will phase out accounts, right? As people graduate, we can get rid of their data. So we will be able to maintain and scale at the tier, so we don't have to pay for more database storage. As for connecting to the database, right, we have 10 connections at a time, but we use pooling on the server side to kind of dole out those connections and manage them at a very intelligent level. So we're never going to actually have 10 connections being used at the exact same moment. So especially by 70 users, right? Like that's never going to happen. So we'll be able to maintain that at scale as well. So the total costs to maintain this application, the domain name just costs $13 a year. Hosting, like I said, $7 a month, that's $84 a year. So total, this costs $97 a year to maintain. And it should scale for years to come without a problem at the same cost. Also, like I said, I have academic credits through the GitHub developer pack that's going to cover this for 2 years. So a few last things. Why do we have an administrator, right? Like, why does Clark Tech Apply rely on a human administrator? It's kind of counterintuitive compared to like a lot of websites now, right? Like job boards, like LinkedIn. Companies come to those, right? LinkedIn doesn't actually have to go find listings and put them on their site. Well, I mean, obviously we're not going to get real companies to come and post on this site like they might on Handshake, right? Because we only have 70 plus applicants. So it's not enough market pressure to get them to come here. But you know, the next idea was, why can't we crowdsource this, right? Why can't, you already saw that users can suggest internships that the admin might have missed, right? So we have the functionality, but why aren't we relying on crowdsourcing? Well, this kind of defeats the purpose of taking the time to gather all these things off the student's hands, right? So that the student can just focus on applying rather than searching, and they can trust that we have everything. And also risks oversight and missed opportunities for internships that might have opened that students might not have stumbled across, right? That our research process that we do daily would find. So a quick story about our competition, right? Over at University of Pittsburgh, they keep a open source sheet, right, with internship listings. As you can see, this is one for summer 22. They've had 98 contributors over the years. They've also used this sheet for 2021, 2020. And they rely on people to come and bring these to them, right? But they have some oversights, right? And effectively, I can give you some examples here. The Susquehanna Investment Group, right, SIG internship, they found that a few days ago on May 23rd. Clark Tech Apply had it up on May 19th, right? So before this was discovered, Clark students had days where they could have applied to this and been the only applicants, right? That's a great competitive advantage. Even more stark, the KeyBank internship that opened up recently, they got this on May 18th. I got this on May 7th, so kind of proud of that. Also, they don't have a validation process, so they will waste people's time. Right now, they have a listing that says General Motors, right? Software engineering internship link, great. But if you click it and you apply to it, you're going to be turned away, because if you actually read the listing, you're only allowed to apply to this internship if you're an active member of a group called EcoCar or AutoDrive, right? And so if you apply to that and then get rejected because you're not one of those, you will have just wasted time. And these kind of listings are allowed to just add to there, right, without a verification process. And it's not efficient. It risks oversight and it can waste people's time. So that's why we don't have a crowdsourcing mechanism. But you know, people who are really paying attention might realize that, wait a minute, you can kind of, you know, through technology, why don't use a web scraper, right? Why don't I use a web scraper to look in all the places that I would look as a human, right, every day? And that's a good idea. It would also require, so a kind of future expansion project I have is to have a scraper, but we'd also need a natural language processing model that we'd have to train. It's not as simple as scraping. Because, for example, right here, this is, as you can see, this is Credit Suisse, right? If you search intern on their site right now, right, 102 jobs. If you search tech intern, 31. If you search tech intern 2022, 16. If you search the exact name of the internship, which is currently offered, 2 results will come up, right? One for each location. And that would be a very, very fine-tuned model, right? Like so effective, very fine-tuned scraper. Effectively, this wouldn't work because you need to actually click on the listings to get the context, right? To understand, can international students apply? Can only juniors apply, right? Is this data science? Is this cyber, right? Like, so effectively what we do is we train a recurrent neural network with the text post, right? The text of the actual listings, and we'd label it with like the labels that I've collected that you can kind of see on the table. And then it would have to, scrape through all the listings on a career site and apply that model to basically say and get those for me. So that's a project, right? It's doable, and it would automate the job hunting mechanism. And some people have expressed interest in future years. People could tackle it. Maybe I'll tackle it. I don't know, but that's an option. Also, there is the idea that, well, the next longest thing in the process, right, for applying the internships is actually filling out those applications, right? We get you and find the applications, but you still have to take the time to fill them out. So Clark Tech Apply could store the information that you put into a job application, right? And either using a cookie or a browser expansion, we could autofill those for you, right? To save a lot of time. You just need to validate. And we tune the program for the 3 big job application softwares, which is Workday, Talio, or Greenhouse. And finally, this is a more immediate thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to harden the application so the administrator, right, in the future, if it's not me, doesn't actually need to touch the code base. I pulled up 2 kind of things, right, on the website that require like hard coding, right? So for example, summer 22 season, this is the banner, right? That'll be 23 one day, that'll be 24. I prefer the administrator to be able to do that on the front end rather than have to go into the code and change that. So last thing I'll talk about is the road ahead, right? So what do I see here? Regardless of honors or no honors, whatever happens today, what do I see for this application going forward? Well, for 21 months, which is how long I have those credits for and can run this for free, I envision a trial period, right? Effectively, I will keep running Clark Tech Apply. I'll put those finishing touches on the code I just mentioned, and I'll act as the administrator and do the daily research methods like I have to keep adding those listings every day. Like I said, platform costs are already covered. And the CS department and faculty can help get the word out, through the email list or through their classes that this is a resource that exists for Clark students. It is gated, so only Clark students can use it. You have to have a Clark email. And the last few days, my logs have been telling me that a lot of people who don't have Clark emails have been trying to get in, and they've been very creative. Nothing's worked, though. The second phase is analysis period, right? After those 21 months, we will have 2 applications cycles worth of data, right, on how students performed. We can ask ourselves, are the students who want internships, did they get them, right? If they had a high engagement on Clark Tech Apply. And does the department see value in Clark Tech Apply, right? And want to keep it going. If so, the department can adopt it, right? Or a club can tie or something like that if they'd be willing. It does cost $97 a year to maintain, which will only start at that point. I mean, if there's some kind of I don't know, scholarship thing or something that I can do to pay for that, that's fine. I don't know how legally that works, or the department could pay it or a club could pay it, right? And then perhaps there'd be a paid student position to act as the administrator and find the listings, such as we have TAs or sysadmins, right, in the department. Or it could be a club position if the club does it, right? And I would train them in my search strategies and kind of my daily steps that I use to find these internships. And I have resources I've made right on my end that I just turn over to them. And yeah, so I'd like to thank everyone. A few special acknowledgements here. Everyone who kind of let me pursue this project because they knew it was kind of important to me. Also, I'd like to thank Evelyn and Caleb, who were very early testers. They gave me a lot of feedback, a lot. They took a lot of time to write. Also to the Clarkies who applied to so many internships during a pandemic, using my sheet, walked away with offers, didn't give up, and they kind of gave me a leg to stand on to say this could really help Clark students. So I want to thank them for not giving up despite intimidating results. And of course, a last thank you to my advisor, Professor Basie, for the weekly check-ins, the guidance, and just the general knowledge that he provided. So I know that this ran long, and there's another presentation after me. I'll let the faculty or Professor Basie decide if we should have questions or not. But thanks again.
Can we applaud?
Okay, yeah, I guess. Thank you, thanks guys. It means a lot. This took a while, and I'm really proud of it. So, and I really hope this helps people going forward in the years. So, thank you so much. I appreciate it, Jamie. All right, what does the chat say? Oh, thanks, Ava. And I'll let Professor Basie take over now, and he can ask if there's questions or anything like that. But
yeah, I think we have time for just a few questions. If anybody wants to get one in, just unmute yourself and jump right in, or maybe put it in the chat and I can read it.
Is there a reason you're not just running this on the Clark CS servers? Is that on Heroku?
Yeah, good question, right? That would save that money, right? So the reason is just I mean, we're both sysadmins. We understand how old some of the systems are, and
yeah.
a lot of the libraries are open source that I'm using and are still being updated to this day. They wouldn't really run on the versions of operating systems that
I did set up the 2004 server like a while ago.
See, there are solutions, right? There are workarounds. I didn't really have time. I wanted to set it up.
Yeah, I see where you're going. Yeah.
But absolutely, a long-term solution, right, to fix those kind of costs that I pay the cloud provider is absolutely set it up on the local server. I am very keen on that idea. So we have a question in the chat. What are your thoughts on Handshake, and what advantages does your system have built in? So the difference, I think, between me and Handshake is Handshake, right? Obviously, companies opt into it. First of all, most companies that we list, right, that I find are not on Handshake. They don't actually list on Handshake. Also, so I think we're getting a lot more exposure and a lot more quantity to things and listings that just companies don't use Handshake for. If you can apply through Handshake, that's good, right? That kind of is a little better than just applying on the general career site, which my web application links to. But overall, Handshake is not very different than LinkedIn or Glassdoor, and we're sourcing from all those and individual company sites. And it's just, if you kind of trust Clark Tech Apply, right, and apply to everything as it comes up on Clark Tech Apply, you will have much better results than the thousands of people who apply to like a Handshake listing once it comes out, right? Because those are not just for Clark, right? They're all universities, right? And we want that competitive advantage. We want to be one of 10 applicants instead of one of 1,000, right? So I think that's something my platform offers.
Other questions? All right, well, let's give Evan another round of applause here, virtually or otherwise.
Thank you, yeah.